Have you ever seen a professional singer sit down while they're doing the performance? Most likely you don't see that very often, especially when it comes to opera. Why? Because the power is in the breath. Likewise, in leadership and communication, there's so much power that comes from breath. Today, I want to teach you how to have a powerful breath and why it's so important as we dive into this subject with Aimee Bruneau.
Welcome to Advance with Mike Acker, the podcast designed to help entrepreneurs, business leaders, and professionals alike break through barriers by improving their practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Your host is a best-selling author, executive coach, and founder of the Advance Public Speaking School and Advantage Publishing Group, two companies dedicated to providing an edge for leaders. Find out more about Mike at mikeacker.com. Now here's your host, Mike Acker.
Hey, great to have you, Aimee. Welcome. Aimee is one of my coworkers at Advance. She is a communication coach, and she does incredible work. So glad to have you today on the show, Aimee.
Thanks for having me, Mike. It's always great talking with you, and especially about breathing. You know that I'm passionate about this topic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, first of all, when we dive into breathing, let's go ahead and define it first, because I think a lot of us have an idea. Hey, we obviously know what breathing is, and why am I listening to a show about breathing when I'm talking about leadership and communication? But can you go ahead and just back up and just give us a good understanding of what breathing really means?
Absolutely. So breathing is this fascinating process. It's something that we all have in common. It's the first thing that we do when we're born, and it's going to be the last thing that we do in this life. And the quality of your life cycle, the quality of each breath in between those two moments, really can paint a picture of the quality of your life. I can't remember which famous yogi said this, but the ancients used to be able to look at a person and determine the quality of that person's life and how long they would live just by watching the way that person was breathing. So breathing is, what is it? It's in and out. The definition of respiration is the interchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood. So if you're just looking at physiology, biology, that is the purpose of breathing. And
I love that exchange right there. And I mean, even going back to, it's the first thing you do and it's the last thing you do. Breath is life and it's energy. And it's where we get power from when we're leading and when we're up in front. I love that interchange of what's going on inside of us. And you know a lot about this because not only do you do communication coaching and you've been a professor in college, you've also taught a lot of theater, and you've also been involved in the yoga world a whole bunch. And so when was it that you really found out and discovered the importance of breath work?
You know, it's interesting. When I was in grad school for acting, I had a professor tell me that I wasn't a very good breather. And to me, I was like, I don't know about that. I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out. You know, what does this really mean? And it took me a while to figure out exactly what she was talking about. Later, when I started looking into yoga, and I wanted to become a teacher. I was very passionate about it, and I started to see firsthand when people were breathing well and when they weren't. So seeing it in other people, I think, really helped me to clue into why we work on breath work, why it's important. It informs what you were calling, it's your life force. Yeah. And good leaders are typically really great breathers.
I love it. Well, let's dive into 3 results of what happens when you don't have a good breath work. There are others, and we talk about this in some of the courses that we run and programs that we do and coaching that we work on together and independently with different clients. So what are some different things that just happen when a speaker, when a leader, when a manager, when anybody who's communicating is not using the full depth of their breath?
Okay, well, let's look at communicators and leaders first off as human beings. So when you're a baby, you've seen babies, when they breathe, their bellies just rise. They're really big and full, and they go down. So they're inhaling fully and they're exhaling fully. And where we start to see shallow breathing, becoming a part of, who we are and our experiences is in grade school. And so what's happening in grade school are two pretty interesting things. One is we're sitting for the first time. There's a reason, sitting is the new smoking, right? We've heard that phrase. What's happening is our breathing capacity, our physiology is scrunched. So the diaphragm doesn't have enough room to play, and our lung space is not being fully utilized. So what happens with this chronic short-term breathing, I mean, if you think about when you get afraid, when you get scared, let's say that you walk around the corner and there's a bear and the bear is chasing you. You take a deep inhalation in and your breathing is almost immediately affected when you're afraid. So if you think about the bear scenario, right, what's happening in your body is your digestion completely shuts off. Your blood pressure skyrockets, right? You start to sweat and you start to lift outside of your body a little bit, right? So like if that bear catches you and it starts to eat on your arm, your body does this really smart self-protective thing where it removes you from this horrific event that's happening. So that's a pretty intense, acute situation, right? But if you look at the chronic long-term of shallow breathing, it starts to show up in different ways. So it's high blood pressure, it's digestive issues, it's sleep problems, and most of all, it's chronic anxiety. And the sad thing is that we have a pill to fix all of those things. And so that is what, that's what we typically do is we take a pill and we fix it. But for people who are looking at the whole system, who are looking at whole health, they'll look at this chronic shallow breathing and they're finding, medical doctors even are finding that if we change the way that we breathe, if we go back to what our bodies actually know, we're able to get in front of those issues. So what you were saying about communication, if I have a speech coming up and I'm nervous about it and my body is telling me that I'm in danger, and I believe that I'm going to give the speech, I'm terrified. I mean, there's a fear of this, right? We call it glossophobia. It's the fear of public speaking. It's real. So if we're getting up in front of other people and we've got this fight or flight response going on, what can we do? How can we work with breath in order to calm ourselves down, to change the messages that are happening between the body and the brain?
Yeah, absolutely. So really, when you look at communicating, and if you're not breathing deeply, you're doing everything that Aimee just talked about. You're really telling your body that you're in a crisis. And what will happen is you'll end up breathing even more shallow and almost just think about like hyperventilating. Like think about it. If you just start going right there, you'll start getting dizzy. You'll start feeling that differently in your body. You might even get a little bit like your eyes start seeing those little squigglies run through it because that's what's happening to your body in that moment. And your nervousness causes you to breathe shallowly, which then causes you to have even more nervousness. So what happens when you breathe shallowly in leadership, in communication, in upfront speaking, in virtual communication? You will end up having even more nervousness. Okay, what else happens? What are some other symptoms that come up when we are breathing shallowly besides nervousness?
Well, the nervousness is obvious. I mean, that's something that I think is really important to add, especially if you are speaking more in your life, right? If you're not getting enough breath and it's affecting your body, it shows. Your hands are shaking. Yeah. It's everything that you said. Your lips are tingling, right? There's a physiological response. So it shows. So first and foremost, I think that, people can see it. But the way it shows up and we were talking about this earlier, it shows up in terms of vocal fry. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have enough breath support with your speaking, I like to think about this in terms of, we have thoughts that go on for a long time, but as chronic shallow breathers, we're not supporting the thought vocally. And so what happens when you're holding your breath and you're talking, it has this sort of sound that kind of, it becomes very congested almost in the vocal tract. But what we've seen, and I feel that vocal fry is a term, it's come out in the last 5 or 6 years, and I started first seeing this, Mike, in YouTube videos. And what's happening in YouTube videos, right? There are people who are very self-conscious. So they're not breathing because it takes a lot of courage to get up on a video, like, even like we're doing right now, to show our faces and to be present with one another or with an audience that we perceive is out there in cyberspace. So that takes some courage. But what's happening is we're sitting in
Right.
chairs while we're, expressing our ideas. And sometimes we feel like we need to grab people's attention. So we just start talking really, really fast because we don't want them to stop listening to us, because our attention spans are so limited. So this talking fast and this, we're running out of air at the ends of our sentences. So there's a caricature of the vocal fry. It's men and women who sound like this. They sound like they're talking like this. And it's become almost something that we admire, because we admire people we see on social media. We admire influencers, but so many of them are just running out of air and they're not getting to the ends of their sentences. So, but unfortunately, that vocal fry, what do you think it sounds like? It has a certain tone.
It's very interesting because it quiets the voice. It makes the voice less appealing. One of the number one thing that we hear again and again in working with clients is that I don't like my voice. People say that again and again. I don't like my voice. And there's a whole reason for that. We won't go into it right here. But if you were to learn how to breathe and breathe out, and to bring that into the natural course of your communication, you would actually appreciate your voice more, because your voice will sound more full. You'll be able to use the full range of your voice and go up and down, because you can breathe, and you can then push that air into different parts of your breath. Well, let's keep on going here. There's a third one. There's a third thing that happens. And I just called this the lack of power. And you and I were talking about it, how it goes right along with vocal fry. But besides vocal fry, where does that lack of power show up in speaking?
Well, you were just mentioning, you were talking about that we're not using the full range of our voice, and that's a huge part of it, right? We have these resonators, and we have this vocal tract, and if you are not using air to fuel your voice to get behind it, it ends up sounding very thin and very tight. And sometimes, when people are very nervous in particular, their voices will start to sound like it's not even their own, and the way that people talk with their own friends, they sound very different than when they're talking with coworkers in a meeting, and it's that fear, it's that holding the breath, it's that self-consciousness, right? We talk about that identity piece in terms of confidence, right? But we're talking structural power, and at the same time that we're talking about, this actual power, right? The power that we have as communicators. But structurally, if you're not using the full capacity of your breath, then you're going to be limiting what's going on in your vocal tract, right? It's not just the vocal cords that we're talking about. There's this whole structure that we're dealing with. And so if you get really good, big, we call them big Buddha belly breaths in yoga, and we call it diaphragmatic breathing, at university. So but it's all the same idea. It's using your full capacity. And when you are breathing fully and richly, and I like to think of it as nourishment, if you're nourishing, your voice and your communication with these big full breaths, then you have so much more power. Stilling yourself is one of the biggest assets to full breathing. Is you are able to stand in front of people and truly be present with them. It's almost as if you can say, when I get up in front of people, and I get nervous still, we all do. But when I get in front of people, I take a breath, I breathe these people in, and I share myself with them. I know this sounds really woo-woo, but there is, there's science behind this as well, that I take you in and I share myself. And that is a very powerful and present place to be operating from. It's a very authentic place to be operating from.
There's a lot of clients will really want to work on executive presence. And when it comes down to executive presence, the quickest way to improve it is by learning how to breathe.
Agreed. Agreed.
Breathe in, breathe out. Getting used to yourself and finding the power that your breath will give you instead of seeking for it somewhere else. I can just give you a lot of money right now by saying, learn how to breathe and you will improve so many areas of your life.
It affects everything. Mm-hmm.
With that, what are a couple of different things besides signing up for some coaching with us? What are some things that people can do to begin to work on their breath work and to take this seriously so that they don't have the nervousness, so that they are able to avoid vocal fry, and so that they can have more power?
Absolutely. I love it when you say that communication is currency. And in many ways, I think of it very similarly. I think that health is wealth, and I think that what you already know how to breathe. Obviously, you're doing it all the time, right? We're doing it right now. If we weren't, it would be pretty obvious.
Right.
But
and I bet a lot of people are really thinking about their breath right now and taking deep breaths.
Right.
Oh, all right. I got to take a deep breath right now. I'm driving or I'm doing whatever I'm doing. I should breathe.
Anybody listening is thinking, am I a shallow breather? And yeah, if you're sitting for most of the day, you probably are a shallow breather, right? And it's not your fault. I think that it's important to know that you know how to breathe. You've forgotten how to breathe. It's the same thing as using, it's when you do a certain exercise and it seems relatively easy, but then the next day that it hurts like crazy and you're wondering, I've never used that muscle before. You've forgotten how to use certain muscles. So, it really is. And that's physical. That is a physical thing that you can change. And there are breathing exercises that you can learn by working with a coach. Breath work is all the rage now, and it's for a reason. They're really finding that this is, getting in front of anxiety and just helping a lot of people. So I would say self-awareness is one thing, right? So self-awareness is, I'm sitting here right now, maybe my shoulders are a little bit raised, or maybe my arms are a little bit forward. We see this a lot on Zoom calls with the hands in the lap and the shoulders forward. There's not a lot of breath work going on in those situations. So self-awareness of how you carry your body when you're not breathing fully, right? Sometimes when we're thinking, we forget to breathe, and you'll see it. Now that you're thinking about it a little bit more, you'll see it happen with people in your life. So that awareness piece is very important. The training is easy. Finding exercises that work for you is really important. You can work with the coach to find out what those are. They're pretty simple, but it's also habits, right? We have so many people writing about habits. I think, the father of new habits, Leo Babauta, wrote, about habits with his blog, Zen Habits. I highly recommend that. Or James Clear with Atomic Habits, right? We look at our habits in terms of water, or we're going to start a new exercise program. We're going to do this every day. Breathing could be a part of this new self-awareness and habit forming, right? So what I like to do is I work breath work into what I call the waiting moments. And the waiting moments for me, I'm waiting for my computer to restart. I'm waiting for this pasta to boil. I'm waiting for this traffic light to change. So whenever I catch myself in a moment of waiting, I check in to see how fully am I breathing right now? Can I feel it in my back? Can I feel it in my sides? Can I feel it deep in my belly? And just get a sense, even just catching yourself, like I'm breathing shallowly right now. I'm a little nervous about the situation that I'm in, and noticing that and just correcting it. It's a pretty simple fix.
Right. I love that. And just to recap, so if you want to work on your breath work, begin to be aware of what you're doing. Take note of when you're in front of people, or when you're put on the spot, or when you're rushing. Just notice what you're doing with your breath work. It's the first way to change really any habit, is become aware of what you're doing. And then second one, begin to practice it. And I love what you said about in the waiting moments. When are you waiting? Work on it then. The reality is that will then change how you act in those moments. You'll become less full of stress in that moment. So if you're waiting for the green light, you'll be less stressed, because there's all kinds of proven scientific research that talks about stress is reduced when you're breathing correctly.
Absolutely. And those high stress moments, like that is where the work that you and I do really comes into play. So a high stress moment that's the other opportunity that you have to practice those breathing techniques. So, we work on coaching people who are getting in front of other people. Those are the moments where practicing that breath work really, it just comes back to people tenfold. When they start to learn to bring the techniques that we teach into those stressful moments at those meetings, in front of those other executives, in front of management, or even just at a job interview. That's when it really starts to pay off and you start to see transformations in your life that haven't, it's this basic thing that we all do, but we've forgotten. And remembering, but then applying it to those high stress moments is the real challenge. We're not going to run into a bear around most corners. Yeah. So when we look at the stress, the high stress moments for us, and you and I, Mike, we work with so many people who have such high anxiety about presentations. So it's been
Not
such a gift.
Presentations. It can be you're getting up in front of your team. It could be you have to give a bad report because your company is not going the way that you wanted it to go. It could be before an interview. And so this breath work in leadership and communication is so crucial. It brings you power. It brings you authority. It helps you be more clear. And on I could go. We could just talk about breath work for hours. When we were planning out this time together, we thought, well, where do we focus in? There's so many different areas. And so a shameless plug for checking out one of our programs or signing up for a session with us to work on breath work. But free advice, work on your breath work, free advice on how to do it, be self-aware, and begin to practice it. Aimee, this is great. You and I talk about this, and we're going to be working with a client here soon after this recording, and probably we'll be working on breath work. Any final thoughts that you just have for our listeners here today?
Just to say that, this is one of the hokiest things I'll say today, but breath is life, and when you're looking at the very basics, that's where I think true transformation begins. And, and it just takes looking inward in certain ways. Coaching obviously is a way to think about these processes or these, these habits that we have in our lives, but it is pretty simple. It's just breathe.
So before you move on from this podcast or this YouTube, I want you to just take a moment to breathe. Allow yourself to bring in as much air as you can fill your belly. Don't worry about your six pack. Don't worry about what you're trying to do there. Let it loose. Breathe in through your nose, all the way in, fill it out, hold it for a moment, and then breathe it out in a nice measured way. Do that for a few times. Get into the rhythm of that. If you're driving, get in the rhythm of just taking some deep breaths while you drive. Maybe you're getting ready to go onto a Zoom call. Take some time, breathe first, whether it's a presentation, whatever it might be, take that breath. Maybe you've been put on the spot. A great way to regain composure is to take a deep breath or two. You might think, I got to talk. It's okay. You have room to breathe. No one's going to punish you because you're taking deep breaths. Well, thank you so much, Aimee, for being on this with me and for sharing your experience. Really, Aimee could go through this and has in different forums in many different ways. So feel free to reach out to Aimee. You can find her at aimee.bruneau@stepstoadvance.com. And you can find her elsewhere on Google, on Facebook. Feel free to reach out to her. I'll also put her contact in the show notes so you can reach out to her. And the show notes are found at connect.stepstoadvance.com. Aimee, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today.
It's a privilege. Thanks, Mike.
All right. We'll see you for the next show.
Thanks for listening to Advance with Mike Acker, a podcast designed to provide an edge for leaders through improving practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Mike is a best-selling author and business owner who has helped many leaders increase their skills and their confidence, propelling them to new heights in their personal and professional endeavors. Join an incredible group of professionals taking the steps to become better leaders at connect.stepstoadvance.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.